You weren't supposed to talk about what happened on that island, but for over a century, people still ask the same question. 3 men vanished. It started in December 1900, and when rescuers arrived, their dinner was still warm. 3 men walked into a lighthouse on December 7, 1900. None of them walked out. When the relief crew arrived on December 26th, they found the door unlocked, the kitchen table set for a meal, 2 of the 3 oilskin coats still hanging by the door, and every single keeper gone. No bodies, no blood, no struggle, just an empty lighthouse on a barren rock in the Atlantic Ocean, and a logbook that described a storm that never happened. This happened in December 1900 on the Flannan Isles, a cluster of remote islands 20 miles west of the Outer Hebrides, Scotland. The lighthouse had been operational for exactly 1 year, built to guide ships through one of the most treacherous stretches of water in the British Isles. 3 experienced lighthouse keepers were stationed there: James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. All seasoned men. Ducat had over 20 years of service, Marshall nearly as much. MacArthur was the occasional keeper, the substitute brought in for this rotation. Everything felt completely normal at first. Lighthouse duty was routine, boring even. 2-week shifts, maintain the light, log the weather, wait for relief. The weather in early December had been typical for the Hebrides, cold, windy, but manageable. They'd been dropped off on December 7th by the lighthouse tender Hesperus, standard procedure. The next relief was scheduled for December 20th. That's when it should have been routine. Then something small happened. On December 15th, the steamship Arctur passed the Flannan Isles around midnight. The captain noted in his log that the lighthouse was dark, no light visible. At first he dismissed it, told himself the weather might have obscured it, or perhaps he'd miscalculated his position, but he marked it in his log anyway. A lighthouse going dark was unusual, but not unheard of. Equipment fails, storms damage mechanisms. Still, he noted it. The scheduled relief on December 20th was delayed by severe weather. The Hesperus couldn't make the crossing, waves too high, winds too strong. So the relief was pushed to December 26th. When the Hesperus finally approached the Flannan Isles that morning, something felt wrong. The lighthouse was dark, no light at all. Captain James Harvey used his telescope. No movement, no signal flags, no keepers visible. That's when they noticed the pattern. Standard procedure required keepers to raise a flag when a relief vessel approached. No flag. Captain Harvey sounded the ship's horn, the signal the keepers were expecting. No response. He fired a flare. Still nothing. The landing party prepared to go ashore. 4 men, including Joseph Moore, the keeper who was supposed to relieve one of the men. That's when they stopped feeling comfortable. The sea was rough, the landing difficult, but they made it to the concrete platform at the base of the lighthouse. Everything looked normal from the outside. No damage, no disturbance, no signs of distress. But the gate at the entrance was closed. Not locked, just closed. And when they opened it and walked up the path to the lighthouse door, it was unlocked. They tried to explain it away. Maybe the keepers were asleep, though that seemed impossible. 3 men sleeping through a ship's horn and a flare? Maybe they were injured, ill. Joseph Moore called out as he pushed the door open. No answer. The lighthouse was silent. But inside, everything was wrong. The kitchen was immaculate, table set, chairs positioned as if someone had just stood up. But the clock on the wall had stopped. The fire in the stove was out, cold. And in the kitchen, they found the remains of a meal, not eaten. Later testimonies would describe it as still prepared, though not warm. The exact state depended on who was telling the story, but the meal had clearly been interrupted. 2 of the 3 sets of oilskins were still hanging in the entrance hall. Oilskins, the heavy waterproof coats keepers wore in bad weather. Only 1 set was gone. That meant 2 men had gone outside without weather protection. In December, in the Hebrides, where the cold could kill you in minutes. Joseph Moore climbed to the light room at the top of the lighthouse. The light mechanism was in perfect working order, the fuel tanks full, but the light had been extinguished, deliberately turned off. He went back down, searched every room. All 3 beds were made, personal belongings, clothes, books, pipes, still in place. Nothing taken, nothing disturbed, except the men were gone. Moore went to the logbook. The last entry was December 15th, written by Thomas Marshall. He described a severe storm, massive waves, wind beyond anything Marshall had experienced in 20 years of service. He wrote that all 3 men had been required outside to secure equipment. He noted that James Ducat had been very quiet. Donald MacArthur had been crying. The final entry, written in the afternoon of December 15th, said the storm had finally passed. Everything was secure. And then, God is over all. That was the last entry. But here's the problem. The storm Marshall described never happened. The Arctur, the ship that passed on December 15th, reported calm seas. Other ships in the area that day confirmed no storm. The Scottish Meteorological Office records showed no severe weather on December 15th. So why did Thomas Marshall write about a storm that didn't exist? The Northern Lighthouse Board launched an immediate investigation. Superintendent Robert Muirhead arrived on December 29th. He examined everything, interviewed the relief crew, checked the equipment. His report documented strange details. A box of ropes normally kept far from the landing area had been moved to the platform edge. An iron railings on the western landing showed signs of damage, bent as if struck by tremendous force. But the eastern landing, the one usually used, showed no damage at all. And there was something else. The keepers' logbooks were meticulous records, weather, sea conditions, routine maintenance. But Marshall's final entries were different, emotional, almost frantic. He described Ducat as silent and MacArthur as crying, behavior completely out of character for experienced keepers. And then that final line, God is over all. What did that mean? Theories emerged immediately. Theory 1. They were swept away by a wave. Plausible. Rogue waves are documented phenomena. A massive wave could have hit the western landing while the men were securing equipment. But problems with this theory. Why would 2 men go out without oilskins in December? Why was the eastern landing undamaged? Why did Marshall write about a storm that didn't exist days before they disappeared? Why would all 3 men be at the western landing, a spot they rarely used? Theory 2. One fell, the others tried to rescue him. This explains why 2 went without oilskins, emergency response. But it doesn't explain the logbook entries about a non-existent storm, why the lighthouse was found perfectly maintained but the light turned off, the emotional state Marshall described. Theory 3. Murder-suicide. Some suggested MacArthur, the occasional keeper, less familiar with the others, had killed the other 2, then himself, throwing the bodies into the sea. But no evidence of violence, no blood, no struggle, just an empty lighthouse on a barren rock in the Atlantic Ocean, and no bodies, MacArthur's or anyone else's. Theory 4. They abandoned their post. Lighthouse keepers deserting would have been a massive scandal, career-ending, legal consequences. But why? And where would they go? The Flannan Isles are 20 miles from the nearest inhabited land in December in the North Atlantic. No boat was taken. The rowboat was still secured. The official conclusion from Northern Lighthouse Board was cautious. Robert Muirhead's report stated the most likely scenario: the men were swept away while attempting to secure equipment during unexpectedly heavy seas. But he couldn't explain the logbook entries. He couldn't explain the emotional state Marshall described. And he couldn't explain why experienced keepers would have made the fatal mistakes required for this theory to work. The Board of Trade Inquiry reached the same conclusion.
swept away by a sea. Case closed. But the questions never stopped. Over the decades, other theories emerged. Supernatural explanations. Local legends spoke of the Flannan Isles as haunted. The islands were known in Gaelic as the Seven Hunters. Old stories told of spirits that lured men to their deaths. Some suggested the keepers encountered something during those days between December 7th and 15th, something that terrified them, something Marshall couldn't bring himself to write about directly. The emotional descriptions, the non-existent storm, God is over all. Was Marshall describing something else, something he couldn't explain in an official logbook? The foreign ship theory. Some researchers suggested a foreign ship, possibly engaged in espionage or smuggling, might have landed at the lighthouse.